Friends, here is an incident that will send shivers down your spine. A poor mother had 4 daughters who became pregnant, without getting married. Who's the father of this child? This incident shook the entire village. How did 4 young daughters of the same house become pregnant? How did this terrifying incident happen? You must listen to this. Please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel. Friends, there was a widow with 7 beautiful daughters. She had no sons, and her daughters were very beautiful. All of her 7 daughters were virtuous. This woman had given her daughters very good education. The catastrophe in her life came when her 4 eldest daughters became pregnant. The shocking thing was that these 4 daughters had no idea who had done this to them. And when the truth about who had made these 4 girls pregnant is revealed, the ground will slip from beneath your feet. The story goes like this. One day, the king's court was in session, and the king was sitting in his court listening to all the petitions. Among the people, a poor old woman came crying, with sadness all over her face. The king looked at the old woman's face and said, "Mother, what is troubling you?" The old woman looked around the court and became silent. The minister, angry, said, "Mother, tell us what is troubling you. Why are you looking around? Tell us your trouble so we can solve it." The old woman, crying, said to the king, "O king, I cannot tell you my problem in front of everyone. I will tell you alone because I am a widow. I have no son, and I live alone with my daughters. If I tell everyone my problem, I fear something might happen to my daughters, and someone might break into my house in the middle of the night. Therefore, I want to tell you my problem alone." The king, quite troubled, began to think that people come to him with such serious matters, and they asked in front of everyone, "What exactly is this woman's problem? Why doesn't she want to tell everyone?" The king said, "Please tell me your problem. All these people are trusted by me." "No one will harm you." The sad old woman crying said, "No, O king, I will tell you alone." The king stood up and said, "Take this woman to my room so she can tell me her story." 2 soldiers then took the old woman to the king's room. When the old woman entered, the king said, "Mother, now tell me what your problem is." The old woman fell at the king's feet, crying. The king said, "Mother, tell me what is going on. My heart is sinking. What could be so bad that you called me alone? I cannot bear to think that in my kingdom there is such a distressed woman, and I am unable to soothe her troubles. This cannot happen. Please, tell me your pain." The old woman, crying, said, "O king, I am a widow. My husband passed away many years ago, and I have no son. I have 7 daughters. I go to rich people's homes to wash dishes, wash clothes, and do other work. I manage my household with the leftover food I get from these wealthy homes, and the small wages I earn for my work. With that, I manage my house, and thank Allah for providing. I have never complained that I am living such a poor life. I have 7 daughters. My daughters are covered and never go outside the house. They always keep a scarf on their heads. My life was going on like this. Once, my eldest daughter became very ill. I took her to the doctor. The doctor said, 'Your daughter is pregnant. She is expecting.' Hearing this, the ground slipped from under my feet. My eldest daughter hasn't even been married. So how did this happen? When I brought my daughter home, I started beating her, asking, 'Who have you made this mistake with? Who is the father of this child?' After I had beaten her a lot, my eldest daughter began crying and folded her hands in front of me, saying, 'Mother, I don't know who the father of this child is. My dear mother, believe me, I never talked to anyone in such a way. I never went out of the house alone. I never looked anyone in the eye. Please, my mother, I don't know how this child came into my belly.' The old woman believed her daughter and said, 'O king, I had given birth to this daughter, and I had realized that my daughter was not lying. A few days later, I was sure that my daughter was not lying.' The old woman started crying while telling the king the story. 'O king, we endured this situation. Then, after a few months, my eldest daughter gave birth to a son, and out of necessity, we started raising the child. A couple of months later, my youngest daughter became pregnant. When I took her to the doctor said, 'Your daughter is also pregnant.' Hearing this, my heart received another shock. I started thinking, who is doing this to my daughters? No one comes to our house, and my daughters don't go outside either. I left the matter in Allah's hands, hoping that Allah would make it clear who is doing this disgraceful act to my daughters. My second daughter also gave birth to a child, and after that, my third daughter. My fourth daughter, who was 14 years old, also became pregnant. I was completely devastated, ruined. I couldn't understand what was happening in my own house. Upon hearing the sorrowful words of this mother, the king was stunned. What kind of story was this old woman telling? After telling her story, the old woman grabbed the king's feet and said, "O king, I need justice. I need to know who is doing this wrong to my daughters." The old woman continued, "O king, please catch the criminal who is doing this to my daughters. I searched a lot, but I couldn't figure out who was coming to our house. This person has ruined our lives." After hearing the whole story, the king said, "Mother, you are now telling me that your fourth daughter has been violated. You should have come to me when the first incident happened. If you had told me then, this would not have happened to the other 3 daughters. But poor people like you, fearing the shame of others, end up swallowing poison, and that poison continues to eat away at you. When the matter becomes unbearable, only then do people come forward and tell their stories. Mother, you are one of those who have come now." The old woman admitted her mistake, saying, "I should have come earlier, but now I have come. Whatever has happened, has happened. But now, I need to find out who is the criminal responsible for my daughters." The king, being a kind-hearted and generous man, said, "Mother, go home now. This problem is no longer yours. It is now my problem, and I cannot bear that such things happen in my kingdom. How can a woman be so distressed? How can a beastly person do such a thing to a poor woman, and I just sleep peacefully? It's a disgrace to my kingship. Therefore, you go home now, for this problem is mine." The old woman silently wrapped her shawl and left to return home. The king, after leaving the court, sat down and began listening to the other people's problems. However, his mind was still with this woman, thinking that justice should be done for her. After hearing the people's issues, when the king was free, he called for his vizier. When the vizier saw the king's troubled face, he asked, "What is it? What has that old woman said that has caused you so much distress?" The king replied, "In my kingdom, there are people who commit such grave sins, and they don't even think that when their crimes are revealed before us, we will punish them severely." The vizier, also concerned, said, "O king, please tell me what is going on." The king then explained the entire story to the vizier, saying, "There is a beast who has become like a termite in this woman's house. This monster has grown so bold that he has made this widow's 4 daughters pregnant. 3 of the woman's daughters have already given birth, and the youngest is pregnant. The remaining 3 daughters of this woman are also at risk. We must find out who is coming to this woman's house, and at what times." The king and the vizier then began thinking about how to uncover this matter. After a while, the vizier said, "O king, I have an idea." The king urged, "Tell me quickly, what is your idea?" The vizier said, "O king, even the walls have ears. Therefore, I will whisper this to your ear." The vizier then whispered something in the king's ear, which the king liked. After this, the vizier took a goat and went to the old woman's house. It was around 9 p.m. when the vizier arrived at her house. The old woman, seeing him, said, "O vizier, why are you here at this hour?" The vizier replied, "The problem you shared with the king has greatly troubled him." The old woman asked, "What will you do with this goat in your hands?" The vizier said, "Please let me come inside your house. Give it to me, and then I will tell you what I plan to do." After entering, the vizier said to the old woman, "Today, we will feed this goat to that monster. But you must not say anything, and quietly watch how this beast will be caught. So, you all go ahead and sleep peacefully. If this plan succeeds, we will find out who the beast is." After this, the vizier took the goat to the roof of the house, tied it there, and then quietly left the house. As he left, the vizier said to the old woman and her daughters, "You all sleep peacefully. Don't worry about any harm coming to you." The vizier then instructed 2 soldiers, "Post guards around the old woman's house." After explaining everything to the old woman and her daughters, he went to the palace. The king was very distressed about the situation. The king said to the vizier, "O vizier, you've placed the goat exactly where we wanted it?" The vizier replied, "Yes, O king. I've tied the goat where it needed to be, and I've carried out the task according to plan." The vizier then said, "O king, now you should also sleep." The king responded, "How can I sleep? Those innocent women are suffering, and I can't sleep knowing that. I won't rest until I catch this cruel person and punish him." At midnight, a shadow quietly moved around the old woman's house. This person climbed onto the roof, and from there, he came down into the courtyard. When the goat on the roof saw someone, it immediately began to scream. It was around midnight, and the entire area was silent. The goat's cries echoed far and wide, waking everyone. The soldiers who were secretly guarding the house heard the goat's screams. When the voice was heard, the soldiers immediately realized that someone had entered the house. The purpose of tying the goat to the roof was so that anyone entering the house would be seen by the goat, which would start bleating. Upon hearing the goat's voice, the soldiers would be alerted. When the man entered the room, the soldiers immediately recognized the sound of the goat and rushed inside the house. The old woman and her daughters also realized that someone had entered when they heard the goat bleating, and they became alert. The soldiers entered the house, and when the intruder saw that everyone was awake, he tried to flee. However, the two soldiers caught him. The man had wrapped a black cloth around his face to prevent anyone from recognizing him. When the soldiers removed the cloth from his face, the old woman and her daughters were stunned. As morning arrived, the court of the king was in session, and the man was kneeling in front of the king. His hands were tied, and his face was still not clearly visible. The old woman and her 7 daughters were also awake now. The king ordered everyone else to leave, and only the criminal, the king, the vizier, the old woman, and her daughters remained. The king said to the man, "Tell me, why didn't you fear me? Now that you've been caught, you must know your punishment will be nothing less than death." The king then instructed the soldiers to remove the veil from the man's face, so he could see the one who had dared to harm the 4 daughters of this helpless old woman. As the veil was removed, the old woman stepped forward, spat on the man's face, and said, "You wretched monster, don't you have any shame? My daughters are like your daughters, and this man is your own nephew. What vile acts you've committed with them. A nephew should be like a son to his uncle. Don't you feel ashamed of what you've done to your own niece and daughters?" The old woman slapped the man across the face, and the king, furious, said, "If he were a stranger, we would have understood, but this is your own flesh and blood. You are an uncle, like a father to them, and yet you have no shame, no honor. Uncle, what happened to the fathers of these girls in this world? The responsibility of an uncle is to care for his niece and nephews, to look after the relationships, and yet you, the uncle, turned into a bandit." The man then said, "O king, I am their uncle. This is a family matter, and you should stay out of it." The king, drawing his sword, placed it on the man's neck and demanded, "Tell me the truth. Why did you do this?" The man, terrified, began to speak. "O king, we were 2 brothers. My brother was older than me, and he married before me. He loved me dearly, took great care of me, because I was his younger brother. But when my older brother got married and had daughters, all the responsibilities fell on his shoulders, and he began to focus less on me and more on his own family. I started to hate my brother. I didn't understand why he was giving more attention to his wife and daughters. Gradually, I began to dislike my sister-in-law and my nieces as well. When my brother passed away, and his daughter grew up to be very beautiful, I began to feel an attraction toward her. I started to hate my brother even more for what had happened. When my brother died, my niece became more beautiful, and I began to have improper thoughts about her. I couldn't understand myself and started feeling filthy inside. I didn't want her to marry, and when I saw her, those impure thoughts would fill my heart. I wanted to take advantage of her. Then, one day, I went to a healer and asked for herbs that could make everyone fall asleep so that I could do as I pleased without anyone noticing. I got the herbs, and I started putting them in the house. I would sneak in through the roof and give them to my sister-in-law and her daughters. They would inhale the herbs, and as soon as they did, they would fall into a deep sleep, unaware of my actions. For 4 to 5 hours, they would be unconscious. Afterward, I would do what I had planned, and once done, I would leave them in that state as if nothing had happened. I would dress them as they were and return home. When my niece woke up in the morning, she would have no idea what had happened to her. I had been doing this for years, But if I had understood that the goat on the roof was meant to trap me, I would have turned back. I thought my sister-in-law had bought the goat to milk it and had tied it on the roof. I didn't pay attention to the goat at that moment. My focus was on my sinful plans. After this man confessed to all his crimes, the king gave a signal to his minister. The minister drew his sword and swiftly decapitated the man. His body twitched for a moment before going still. This was the punishment for this cruel and monstrous uncle. The king then turned to the old woman and said, "If you had told me earlier, your other 3 daughters would not have suffered this pain. But I promise you that I will bring happiness to these 4 daughters, as they truly deserve it." The king arranged for 4 of his most understanding and wise soldiers to marry the 4 daughters, and gave them a great amount of wealth and riches. The old woman, overwhelmed with gratitude, thanked the king through tears. The king said, "Now, you need not worry. When your remaining 3 daughters are of age, let me know, and I will find suitable matches for them as well." This was the story of a just king and a monstrous uncle who failed to act as a father figure. The moral of this story is that if anyone is suffering injustice, they must raise their voice for their rights. If they remain silent out of fear, the world will take advantage of them. Friends, make sure to share this video with others, as we upload meaningful stories on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe and give a like to this video. Allah Hafiz.